Today we're going to do a frequently asked questions about WinOS 2. How do I protect my WinOS 2 installation from corruption? How do I get TCP/IP to work with WinOS 2? What are some of the common problems with TCP/IP on WinOS 2, such as the Winsock.dll? Why do some Windows 3.1 programs fail to install and/or fail to run on WinOS 2? What are some methods to install programs manually on WinOS 2? Does Internet Explorer 5.0 work with WinOS 2? Does Win32s work with WinOS 2? Does WinG work with WinOS 2? So how do I protect my WinOS 2 installation from corruption? So let's do this one. Let's see if we can get this one knocked out. So what I typically do is just zip up the WinOS 2 folder. Do that on a regular basis when you know that WinOS 2 is running right. And when you need to restore, you just do an xcopy, copy the files back in place. You don't delete the WinOS 2 folder and replace it. You just do an xcopy because there are shortcuts to various WinOS 2 executables. You don't want to mess up those up. So let me show you what I do. So may or may not be aware that WinOS 2 is inside of OS2/MDOS, and then there's a folder called WinOS 2. And ecom station, I don't know if it's specific to just ecom station. It makes it easy to back up this folder. So actually, I went too far. Let me do this again. I meant to leave the folder open. So there's MDOS. I'll open that. Alright, so got the WinOS 2 folder selected. Normally, you don't have WinOS 2 running when you're trying to back it up. I would suggest not having that, but I'm going to do that because I want to leave this slideshow up. I'm going to do that right now. So I get an option as pack tree, and now it's making a zip file of the WinOS 2 folder. And this is how I protect myself against WinOS 2 files getting corrupted. I could always, I normally just take this file and store it on a network drive. And if I need to, I can pull it back from the network drive and unzip it and xcopy it over to the WinOS 2 directory. So there we go, it's complete. Close this folder, and you can see that I have a backup of it, and I just save this backup to a network drive, and then when I need it, I bring it back in, extract it probably, let's say, show you this. Let's say I was restoring it now. I would probably, so if I had it on network drive and I copied it here, I would extract it here, and then xcopy it to, what's the xcopy command? Let me just show you that. I don't want to extract it right now and make a mess. Let me show you what command I'm talking about. So there's an xcopy command inside of OS2. It's actually inside of a lot of operating systems. So I just like say xcopy WinOS2 star.star /MDOS WinOS2 star, and I say /s/e/b/b /h/t and /o. And that's how I would restore it. That's the xcopy command I use to restore it. How do I get TCP/IP to work with WinOS2. Well, first you have to make sure it's working and you're in DOS. Let's get started with that. Easy way to check to see whether it's going to work in WinOS2 is to see if it works in DOS. So let me do that real quick. Do a quick little test. So here's DOS, and if I do ping.www.google.com, it should work. And as you can see, it does work, because I've already made it work with my system. So let's stop that. There's two things you'll notice here. One is that it was able to resolve the domain name, and then the second, it was able to ping it. Typically, the first problem you run into is that you can't resolve the domain name. The reason that I think is the most common reason for that is that you're using DHCP, so you're not using a static IP address. And when you do that, when you use DHCP, it doesn't configure the DOS resolver correctly to resolve the domain name. So the domain name resolution is a big problem in my mind. So let me show you how I fix that. So I think it's important. Exit out of this. So there's two spots. So the first spot to check is the network folder that has the resolve in it. First resolve, like the OS2 level resolve. For me, I actually have to use resolve 2. There was a resolve 1, but it's for a different network adapter, I think. But one of the key things inside of this, if you're using DHCP, you have to have a domain name specified. It could be anything, but in order for the name resolution to work, there's two resolve files. There's one that's OS2 specific, which really isn't the main cause of the problem. It's the other one, but what the system does is it copies this one to the other folder. All right. So with DHCP, every time it renews, it overwrites this file. So to prevent that from happening, you have to make the file read-only. So I have it read-only, and when the computer reboots or it updates DHCP, gets new IP address, it keeps this file the same. So that's in the that's the OS2 network, etc. folder. And then there's the one for DOS specifically, which is similar location, and it actually doesn't say resolve 2 on this one, it just says resolve. And you can see that they're both the same, and you can see the one for DOS is also marked read-only. So if you can keep them both read-only, you'd be in pretty good shape with that, and that'll fix the name resolving thing. When you don't have that domain name specified, you don't have this, it usually shows up with just domain and then blank. If you have DHCP without this part of it, it just fails to work. So that's the first part. So first part, make sure DOS works. So let's move to the second part. Second part is configuring Windows to work. So that's in WinSetup. So in my WinOS2, I have it set to IBM Peer for OS2. To be honest, I don't know if it really makes a difference to switch it to one of the other ones, because I've noticed that multiple options still work, but I think you have to at least pick one. It can't be none. So it's got to have something set up for that. So once you have that, the thing that you need to have is the Winsock.dll. All right. So we haven't gotten to this third question yet. We're still on the second question. Winsock.dll is pretty important. You have to use the Winsock.dll that comes with OS2. You can't use Trumpet Winsock or any of the other Winsock.dlls. You have to use the OS2 one specific. So, like the directory structure for my system, it has a TCP/IP DOS bin Winsock.dll. So this DLL is the one that came with OS2, and you have to use it with WinOS2 in order to get the network services from OS2 over to WinOS2. So this is like the driver that gets you connectivity in WinOS2. And also another problem. So let's address both of these. It's somewhat related with the Winsock. So the other, so I'm going to do number 3 also. Some common problems with TCP/IP with WinOS2 such as Winsock. This DLL is typically packaged in, actually not this version, but the like if you get something for Windows 3.1, like a program like Internet Explorer for Windows 3.1, it will come packaged with its own version of Winsock. That's not compatible. Another thing I mentioned earlier is Trumpet Winsock. That was very popular back in Windows 3.1's heyday because it gave you the dialer so that you could dial people, you could dial up the internet and stuff like that. You needed that version of the Winsock. You needed the Trumpet Winsock in order to dial up. If you didn't have Internet Explorer, or you wanted to be able to dial up the internet without having to run Internet Explorer, you needed some sort of Winsock. But when you have OS2, you've already got a Winsock. You have the Winsock that IBM gave to you, and that's the one you're supposed to use. And you can't use more than one at a time. You can only use one Winsock at a time, and the way it typically works is they recommend that you delete all of the other Winsock.dlls on the system, all the other DOS Winsock.dlls on the system, to make sure that you don't try to run 2 different versions of Winsock, which I think will actually crash Windows 3.1 if it tries to load up another instance of the DLL that's a different version of the Winsock. So, so understand that in order for the network to work in Windows 2, you need the IBM Winsock.dll, not any of the other ones. If you install Internet Explorer 5 or 3 or whatever, and it has the Winsock.dll, you have to delete it from the directory and probably replace it with the IBM one. So it's typically not recommended that you have copies of it, but the way that the Windows 3.1 programs work sometimes, they want it in that same directory as executable, so you don't really have a choice. And I think I can show you that that's the case for, we're skipping ahead a teeny bit, that's the case for Internet Explorer 5. So I've got Internet Explorer 3 and Internet Explorer 5, and in this directory, I think I copied the Winsock DLL in there. Let me see, let me just open it. Let's see, is it in here? Yes, it is. But this is the, like I said again, it's in this directory, but it's the OS2 version of it. The one that comes with it doesn't work. You can't use 2 like I said, you can't use 2 Winsock.dlls at the same time, especially if they're different. Yeah, and you don't need the other one. You never need the other one because you're always going to get your network provided to you from OS2. You're not gonna go independently dial up internet inside of WinOS2 and then use, and it just doesn't make any sense. You could set up a dial up inside of OS2 and then share the internet over via the OS2 Winsock. You don't need to dial up inside of dial up to the internet inside of WinOS 2. All right. Just to show you that it's working on my computer, I'm going to open up Internet Explorer 5 and go to images. It doesn't support PNG, that's why the Google logo doesn't show up. So let's search for something like the new movie, let's say Wonder Woman 1984. And you can see it worked. Kind of neat. Stop. Exit out. So the next question is, why do some Windows 3.1 programs fail to install or fail to run in WinOS 2? So the problem with Windows OS 2 is it's not satisfied with the layout of the machine. So it doesn't like the folder that it's in. It was written at a time where, you know, some of the developers said, well, I don't know how to determine which folder Windows is installed in, so it immediately searches for C/Windows, and that's not the folder that WinOS 2 is typically installed in. And if you did have it in there, yeah, you'd be getting rid of that one issue, but there are other issues for why programs fail to run or fail to install. So there's the directory structure. There's the drive letter. In my case, mine is far from what a typical Windows 3.1 expects. So it's on drive O, and then well, this is the way it normally does this, but this is the way that it's nested inside of OS 2 and it's an MDOS, right? So understand that this is still Windows 3.1. IBM didn't really change Windows 3.1. I think what they kind of did is said, oh, does Windows 3.1 work on our virtual DOS machine? Yes, it does. Therefore, we will claim victory, and we know that we can, just the base package, we can get it to run. And if there's anything that's a pain point, the vendors will take care of it. Like if the installer fails to work in this configuration. Typically, some setup programs look for a limited amount of memory. You run into this problem with Internet Explorer install. They did this. They put this check in there that says if you don't have 4 megabytes of memory, you shouldn't install Internet Explorer. All right, but the check wasn't written perfectly, so they added a switch to turn it off. Because if you have, say, 64 megabytes of memory, the check fails and it says, oh, you don't have enough memory. And actually, you have tons of it. In this case, I have a lot of it. I've got over 100 megabytes of memory available to WinOS 2. So the check fails every time. Another reason why some programs fail to install or fail to run on WinOS 2 is that the virtual DOS machine that OS 2 has is not a perfect replication of MS-DOS that Windows 3.1 is expecting, or WinOS 2 is expecting. As I explained earlier, WinOS 2 is really just Windows 3.1. IBM did make some changes, I think, but they weren't that much, and they were probably expecting that their virtual DOS machine would get to the point where it's indistinguishable for WinOS 2 from the normal MS-DOS, whatever 6.2.2 or whatever version that WinOS 2 or Windows 3.1 was targeting. So that's the other reason why they fail. It's just incompatibility made by the virtual DOS machine. So the next question is, what are some methods to install programs manually in Windows 2? So what I usually do is I install the program outside of OS2 on a copy of Windows 3.1, and then I copy the registry settings and the files over to WinOS2. And then I merge the registry settings into WinOS2 using one of 3 registry tools that Windows 3.1 comes with. You have to use the right registry tool, but use one of the 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away from the OS2 desktop and fiddle around with DOSBox and VMware Player to show you how I kind of get what I need out of the setup programs and then import them back into WinOS2.
Alright, so here's the fun stuff. How to use DOSBox to help you set up WinOS2 programs. So I have a backup of everything WinOS2 related on a network drive that I copied from my OS2 computer. So basically I just did folder backups. And I showed you earlier how to do this one, the WinOS2 one. So I'm going to use my backup. So I'm going to copy it from the network drive to my fake drive O that I use in OS2, but I'm going to use it for DOSBox. And while that's copying, I'm going to show you, this is the DOSBox config. So what I did was I went over to OS2, I took all the environment variables that were in OS2 and I set them up as part of my DOSBox configs, which includes the Windows 3.1 dir, the path information, the TCP/IP settings and stuff like that, all the environment variable stuff to make it as similar to OS2 as well. So there's actually some specific features for Internet Explorer 5, the IE environment variable, and then PCTCP environment variable. So that's that. So now it's still copying from the network drive. And when it's done, I'm going to show you how to get it to run in DOSBox because it's not going to run right away in DOSBox. So let's wait. Alright, now that it's done copying, I'm going to extract using 7-zip. Like I said, this is everything that is either installed in WinOS2, like a program that I installed for WinOS2, or a WinOS2 file. So this is the root of drive O. This particular one has to be nested in its proper location. So there's just an OS2 folder, then MDOS. This is just replicating what's in how the directory structure is in OS2. So there we go. So I don't need the zip files anymore. I'm going to delete them. But I still have a copy of those zips on the network drive. I wouldn't delete them from there. So now we're going to run DOSBox. And at this point, WinOS2 is not going to work. You have to run the setup program. So I have a copy of Windows 3.1, and I'm going to run this. This is basically the regular Windows 3.1 setup. It will, if you have that environment variable set, it will find the Windows 3.1 install. You have to do this in order to fix the files so that they run outside of an OS2 environment. So this part You have to change the display because that driver doesn't work with DOSBox. It only works with OS2. You can't pick a Super VGA driver at this point because it's going to try and run in standard mode, and the only driver that's compatible with standard mode is the plain old VGA driver. So you have to pick this one, otherwise this is going to fail. So it's going to upgrade the OS2 install. It's going to complain about some files being newer, and I'm going to keep those newer files. Now it's going to ask for my name. So I'm just going to put in something. I'm just going to click through. Actually, not clicking, the mouse, the keyboard doesn't work. So I don't have a C drive because I don't have a C drive over in the OS2 environment. At least it's not being used. So it complains. All you have to do is say cancel, and it'll continue installing. And I want to keep the newer files. Then now I should be able to run Windows 3.1. At this point, I can update the video driver if I really want. It doesn't matter. I'm only really using this to help me set up programs that I couldn't set up natively in WinOS 2. So I'll show you. I mean, I guess I could show you how to set up the Super VGA driver, but nobody really cares about that. Probably. Let me see. I gotta find the folder. Oh yeah, so you just go in there. You have to have the driver available. I already had the driver available. So I'll just go ahead and pick it. Might make it easier to show things too, to have a higher resolution. Complaining about an AW32 because there's no AW32 in DOSBox. But I still have sound. You may not be able to hear it. All right, so this is kind of what I do. If the setup program runs, let's say let's pick one that I have. And I'm not going to run this all the way through. This is what I was saying about the memory thing. So there's a command to say, oh, only look at 16 megabytes. It still doesn't, whatever. So this is the Internet Explorer 5 install, right? So let's imagine that this actually worked. All right. So it would either work. So I'm using DOSBox and VMware, but for this demo, it's just DOSBox. But the same thing applies to VMware. What I was planning. So things that don't install via DOSBox, I'll use VMware Virtual Machine to install them there, and then the rest of the process. So let's imagine that I followed through with this install and it went successfully. This is just an example, right? So I'm going to cancel. Now, so we've installed Internet Explorer, right? We're at the point where we have Internet Explorer installed on the machine and it works, right? So at this point, you're like, how do I get this over to my WinOS 2 computer, right? So this is what I do. You take the files that it created, either in the system directory or amongst all the directories. That's one thing you have to do. That's the obvious thing, is get the files and the folders, zip them up, and copy them over to OS2. And in this case, they'll be, because I made the drive letter that it is in OS2, it will be the right, you know, it'll be in the right location. Now, here's the other part. There are 3 registry programs in Windows 3.1, but you only need one of them. So the first one that you encounter is just called regedit. This is fairly useless. It's overly simplistic, and it's not what you typically think of when you say registry editor in Windows. So this one's pretty much worthless. Now, there's a variant of that with a flag on it. So it's the same executable, but with the flag V. So this is, I think this is Microsoft's second attempt at having a registry editor. Now this one resembles your modern Windows a lot more closely, but it's still pretty much worthless. All right, this one's worthless. So then Microsoft had a third attempt, which is basically identical to the one in the modern Windows, which is this. So this should look familiar if you ever looked at a registry setting. So this is the one that you use to do your work. So like for the example, we just installed Internet Explorer 5. I know I didn't show you that, but for shortness, to make this video shorter, I'm just going to say we just install it. So what's the process? So we need to identify what has changed in the registry and copy those settings. And they're not that difficult. Windows 3.1 programs rarely use a registry. So copying the settings isn't as hard as you might think. So in this case, what we do is we say, you know what? I want the entire Microsoft folder. So the HKey local machine all the way down. You just select that one folder, say export registry file. We'll just call it Internet Explorer 5 install. And save it to drive O. There you go. And then we have another one. So this is current user. So I could export this to, I could call this one the second one. All right. So there's not very much, like I said, there's not very much to Windows 3.1. Now you could say take the class root, take the root folder and export that as well, right? And there we go. So now I think we have all of the registry settings that got installed with Internet Explorer 5. So now what you could do, so you could do this in DOSBox if it managed to install correctly in DOSBox, or you could go over to Virtual PC, because sometimes DOSBox has compatibility issues, because it's not a real 622 DOS either. It's a kind of like a virtual DOS machine as well. So I'm going to escape out of that. Now, what I typically do is, since I'm in pretty good shape with DOSBox because I have the right drive letter, I can expect that when it references a drive letter, it will be O/, whatever. So I've replicated the directory structure. So when it created all these keys and stuff, it created them with the right directory. And if it didn't, I can correct it, right? So that's the idea. So yeah. Now, I mean, I could look at VMware Player. So this is the other method. So the stuff that doesn't work in DOSBox, I have actually a Windows 3.1 VMware Player version of Windows 3.1. Sometimes things will install here that won't install inside of the DOSBox version. But the problem with this one is I don't copy this from OS2. This is just like a flat install. And let's run that registry program again. So what happens here is, like, let's say I exported this one, and it's not even the right drive letter. See, it says C, and I am in OS2. I'm using drive O, so it's not. This is just a dirty example. So I just exported it. I'm gonna close it out. I'm gonna exit out. Oh, that's right. It doesn't work. I'm gonna stop the virtual machine, power it off. Let's see, VM or virtual machines. So there's a folder. So here's the Windows 3.1, and when it's not running, I also keep a backup of it. But when it's not running, you can open this up and say 7-zip, and then copy the registry file, locally. And then this is that edit process. So in this case, I would have to replace all the instances of C/ with the appropriate O/. So including these Windows directories, you can see how they're the wrong directory for OS2. So I'd go and fix this before I go into OS2 and import it, right? So that's the idea. So let's go back to DOSBox. Let me show you. So imagine we're over in the OS2 computer world. We would just import the registry files that we exported from DOSBox or VMware Player after we're done editing them. So we copy the files that were created and the registry entries, and we import them into OS2, and that's sort of like the raw way of, the manual way of installing OS2 programs. So is there anything else to mention about that? You can use file dates, sort of, to figure out what's changed. So let's look at that real quick. So you can sort of see what's changed recently, and kind of copy things over to the OS2. There are some things that you have to do manually. So we can't have the S3 drive. We don't want to copy over the S3 driver install over to OS2. So we don't want the S3 driver. So what you have to do, there's two files that you have to manually manipulate, and basically you're just taking the differences from the DOSBox install of Windows 3.1 and you're copying them over to OS2. Yeah, so you have to edit the WinINI file manually in OS2. So you got to figure out what's changed inside of the WinINI file. Let's find something Internet Explorer specific in here. Basically, you end up comparing these two files. So you you compare it and you get the differences. I don't see anything off the bat for Internet Explorer, but there should be something in here. Yeah. Obviously, there's some. I installed Office, so there's Office specific stuff. So I would copy that over if it didn't install on WinOS 2. Um, there's got to be something here. And if there's nothing, there's nothing. That's actually a good thing. But the other file is system.ini. So you kind of go through this and figure out what's missing from OS2 in comparison to this, the WinOS 2 compared to this. And actually, I don't see anything. Oh, there we go. Spoke too soon. So there's 3 device drivers that Windows 3.1 created, or the setup program for Internet Explorer created, and they're referenced in the system.ini file. I don't even know if they're used because, like I said, I'm using the OS2 version of Winsock, and the dialer and all that stuff isn't really relevant um, to the whole operation. But the reason why you have to edit these files manually in OS2 and just take the differences is because you don't want to have the S3 Trio driver to run. You want the one that it was set up before, which was some kind of generic driver that WinOS 2 uses. So you don't want this. I'm highlighting it because I'm saying you don't want this.
So the next question is, does Internet Explorer 5.0 work with WinOS 2? So let's take a look. Spoilers, does work. You just have to figure out how to get it to install, which I kind of covered in the previous question. So here it is again. Actually, that's so HTTPS doesn't work, but the rest of it does. So anything that uses regular HTTP, so is a lower. Yay! Stop it. So even having 512, the 512 cipher, that doesn't fix the HTTPS because basically there's actually a standard. I search for it. Let me go back. So the standard that Internet Explorer 5 for Windows 3.1 is missing, I think, is TLS standard 1.2. So Internet Explorer 5 doesn't have TLS 1.2 or 2.0, and that's why HTTPS doesn't work, but regular HTTP works. It's the quick and dirty about Internet Explorer 5. If you want to see the version number, there it is a little bit more. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. Does Windows 32 work with WinOS 2? Alright. This is a little bit more complicated because the answer is yes, but the problem is not all of it works with WinOS 2. Actually, let me just show you it working. So the base examples is it shows, dear friend you, and Gotta be careful when you close it. But to stress a point, the point is that you can't use the latest version of Windows 32S. You have to use a mixture of the two. Like, there's a final version of Windows 32S, and then there's the previous one. You have to use a mixture of the files to get it to work. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So all of the Windows 32S stuff is inside the system folder. There's a folder called Windows 32S. So I ended up having to mix two different versions of Windows 32S DLLs. I don't remember which one got out of sync, but there were two different versions of Windows 32. I had to figure that out by hand, like which DLLs work together with WinOS2. And I don't have them in front of me because it's been such a long time since I've done this, but yes, Windows 32S does work with WinOS2. Does WinG work with WinOS2? The answer is yes. So let's show you that. So WinG has an example that it installs. So I have another example, but it's not truly supported by WinG and WinOS2 because it was really designed for Windows 95. So there was a game called Echo the Dolphin, and yeah, it's the Sega game. It was designed for Windows 95, but ended up using WinG instead of DirectX. So it doesn't work perfectly, but I figured I'd show it, and this will be a nice wrap up to the video. that's about enough for Echo the Dolphin. It crashes fairly often. It's not really a showcase game to show for WinG support. Well, that's all I have to show. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And maybe there could be more videos. We'll see. Have a good one. Bye.